Greetings all, and welcome to Citizen AY. I'm just going to take one or two things. This is quite a long broadcast. It's about the U.S. Designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern, CPC. You're listening to Citizen AY. I'm doing this on YouTube only for today. I may restream it on TikTok, but I'm just trying to test this as I go along. I hope that is making sense. Let's have a look at let's see what we have here. If I'm live, listening to Citizen so I'm doing this on YouTube only for today. So please do share. Let us watch again. I'll be coming in and out of the broadcast. I've got a bit of a cold, that's why you've not seen me for the last few days, but I'm fine. It's okay. So we're just gonna please do share. Let us watch again. Okay. I'll be coming in and out of the broadcast. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at it. So just bear with me. So without much further ado, please do share the broadcast. Subscribe. You're listening to Citizen AY, the platform where we speak truth to power. Again, specifically, we're talking about we're going to watch the U.S. Congressional Congress, where they've spoken about that Nigeria is now a nation of particular concern, and we're hearing talks about even today that the U.S. are making plans to to sort of take military action. What that would look like, we don't know. So I've been frantically following the news about what's going on, and the key thing to really say about this is that unfortunately the terrorists can wear camouflage. They can wear they can have satellite phones. They can have armors that is not even available to our own army. I'm not saying this just out of I'm saying the fact, because a lot of videos that I've come across, the terrorists even have anti-tank guns that can anti-aircraft guns, and they were even showing them off. Now those are meant to be in the hands of the Nigerian government. How did they get into the hands of these terrorists? And also, there are some accomplices who are working within the government. There's been a bombshell tonight in another broadcast which I saw. Adeola Fayon, I think it is. She talked about this in quite an alarming way. The guy who's been a security expert for quite a number of years, and he stated even as high as the vice president of Nigeria, and so many other things that he talked about, and Gumi as well, and Pantami. All of the names of the people that we all long suspected are exactly the names that this man mentioned, and I might do a separate broadcast on that and talk about it. So this is quite a concern. This is a really big deal. But let us watch this, and I might interject in between. Let us watch. Do beg your pardon if it suddenly cuts. I'll try and talk about it. I'll try and come in. But let us watch, and let's just watch that again. Now, I'm afraid to say, for me personally, I think, in fact, I know that the U.S. have ulterior motives. It's about the loss of power. This is what is really going on. A lot of the financial structures that they've used to hold and underpin what is effectively a colony, that's what we have been. They are being taken away because Nigeria is going to join BRICS. And apparently I found out that we're going to be doing, I didn't know that they signed a nuclear plant deal with Russia. I need to confirm that, but I found that out yesterday through one of the reports I've been reading through. There's a lot going on. Of course, the concern for me has and remains the safety of our people on ground. And I am going to say to the government of Nigeria, please allow people to protect themselves. Provide the means for which they can protect themselves in their community, because our communities are being ransacked by these marauders, by these terror groups who are going to communities and chasing people away, unaliving people, holding people to ransom. And even we are now having some politicians are now acting as go-betweens between these terrorists and the people to get our people out from them. And of course, that's usually for a fee. I mean, in the case of Ekiti, in Eruku community in Kwara State, a place called Eruku, where they killed 3 people. Now, they've abducted 30, and they're asking for 3 billion naira. 3 billion naira. Now, so far, in that case, I've not seen any politician going to say they're going to negotiate. But in the north, in Katsina, we've seen a politician, a member, House of Rep, or local State House of Assembly member, go in and negotiate with terrorists that were walking around. They have on them, they have a camouflage. Now, in Nigeria, if you're not an army person, you're not supposed to wear military camouflage, number one. Number two, you're not supposed to have military-grade weapons on you without certificate. And number three, so camouflage, satellite phone, and then they have arms on them, and this is, I am just, and they're having an open discussion with these guys, and they're holding the mic and they're talking to, as though they're having a business transaction. This is horrifying. But let us watch this, and I'll give you more updates as and when we get it. Let's as we're going along, let's proceed. So we need to watch this with a fairly, shall we say, not too what's the word? The US have got ulterior motives, and they don't really. Just look at how the US are treating American Christians, the Christian Americans in America. Look at what is going on in America. Flint, so many, sundown towns, all of this. So America is not talking about that, but I'm just saying that when you are watching this, and of course I fully understand those who are saying America must come and intervene because of the sheer injustice of genocide going on. I fully understand that, but we have to understand that the US never go into any of those places without any ulterior motives. They're in Ukraine now because they're looking at resources that they could take out, and of course it's not looking like it's going to be possible, so they're trying to pull back. We don't want to get sucked in that, but nonetheless, let us watch this. Here we go.
As well, I applaud President Trump's recent decisive action to redesignate Nigeria as a country of particular concern for engaging in and tolerating severe violations of religious freedom. One of our witnesses today, Bishop Wilfred Anabe from the Diocese of McCurdy, testified before our subcommittee last March. He said, in part, militant Fulani herdsmen are terrorists. They steal and vandalize, they kill and boast about it, they kidnap and rape, and they enjoy total impunity from elected officials. None of them have been arrested and brought to justice, close quote. Today, by Zoom, Bishop Anabe will say, in part, on the 13th of March, 2025, when I last appeared before this committee, I warned that the situation was dire and demanded urgent attention. Tragically, the past half year has proven those warnings understated. The continued attacks on vulnerable Christians, villages by the Fulani ethnic militia, and their counterparts, both in the middle belt of Nigeria and elsewhere in the country. In my own diocese of McCurdy, you are all familiar with the massacres of Saturday, the 13th of June in Wada, where 278 persons, men, women, and children, were killed in a manner too gory to describe here by people shouting Allah Akbar, while slaughtering their victims. It took the prayer of the Holy Father, Pope Leo, on Sunday the 14th of June for the government of Nigeria to even acknowledge this evil. Even so, the federal government still seeks to downplay the numbers and has yet to properly care for the survivors, even as I speak, as he will be speaking momentarily by way of Zoom. Abductions of the clergy and laity remain rampant. Priests and pastors are prime targets for elimination. In 2015, one of our colleagues, a member of this subcommittee, and also this full committee, I should say, of Foreign Affairs, and a former House colleague and Green Beret officer, and now U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz. He was deployed in 2015 to Nigeria as part of a Nigerian, he was part of the Special Forces to provide training and security assistance to the Nigerian Navy SEALs in their fight against Boko Haram. During this time there, he said yesterday, a couple days ago, more than 300 girls were reported missing because of Boko Haram's extremist violence. Working alongside his team, Ambassador Waltz supported Nigerian SEAL operations that ultimately helped rescue many of these girls from the oppressive conditions imposed by Sharia law. This past Tuesday, Ambassador Waltz also said at a special seminar on Nigeria that the situation in Nigeria now has only grown more dire. He went on to say, churches burn, mothers bury their children for the crime of singing Amazing Grace, pastors are beheaded for preaching the Sermon on the Mount, and entire villages awaken to gunfire simply by calling Jesus their Lord. This is not random violence. It is deliberate persecution, as northern militant groups enforce Sharia law and unleash targeted attacks on Christian communities. He also pointed out, and it was this week, that 25 girls went missing, many of whom who will now vanish and have vanished into the dark underbelly of extremism and sex slavery. Make no mistake, these ongoing attacks are based on religion, and diverting attention from it denies what we have seen with our own eyes. Yeah, there may be other factors, but religion is driving this. Kill the infidel. We see it in other places, and we're seeing it now, sadly, in Nigeria, and it's been going on for many, many years. 13 years ago, in this room, 2012, I chaired a hearing focusing on the slaughter of Christians by Boko Haram, and the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Johnny Carson, testified at that hearing and said, and I quote in part, that the phenomena of Boko Haram is one of discrediting the central government in power for its failure to deliver services to the people. I asked him at the time, are you kidding? I responded by asking why Boko Haram abducts and rapes Christian girls and uses force and coercion, even death, to convert Christians to Islam. On a trip to an IDP camp in Jos, I met many survivors. One man who we had testify here, named Adama, who they took him out of his house. His wife was screaming, please don't hurt my husband. They put a AK-47 to his cheek and said, you renounce your faith or we'll kill you. He said, well, I'm ready to meet my Lord. They asked him again. He repeated that, and they shot him. They blew his face very, very horribly. He survived. And when I met him, I invited him to come and testify. He did. And he said, you've got to realize who Boko Haram is and stop this idea, this is my words, but his sentiment of denial, saying, it's nothing to see here. So I asked Johnny Carson further, why won't they designate Boko Haram, at least, if not a CPC country, as a foreign terrorist organization? And he said they don't believe it. They're not a foreign terrorist organization. I worked on that for 3 years, additional hearings. On the day I was marking up my bill, and it was called the Boko Haram Terrorist Designation Act of 2013, to put Congress on record demanding an FDO designation, that day the administration declared Boko Haram a foreign terrorist organization. I was very happy with it, but we could have done that 3 years earlier and maybe had found out what their sources of weapons and funding and everything else might have been, thereby, again, mitigating some of the harm. For too long, the world has looked away, a culture of denial, as radical Fulani militants, Boko Haram, and ISIS West Africa have waged a relentless campaign of terror, murder, and displacement across Nigeria, including the states of Plateau, Benue, and Kaduna. According to Open Doors, and I just want to say something about Open Doors, I've worked with Open Doors for 40 years. I knew the founder, Brother Andrew, an absolutely honest and committed man, and that organization to this day continues to speak truth to power all over the world, including in Nigeria. Well, they have said, Open Doors, more Christians are slaughtered in Nigeria than anywhere else in the world. I co-chaired the China Commission. I just left a hearing that we're holding over on the Senate side on religious persecution there, against everyone, against the Falun Gong, against the Christians, against the Buddhists in Xinjiang, not the Buddhists in Tibet, and the Muslims in Xinjiang. And while they kill many, they incarcerate and harass more than they slaughter. These groups in Nigeria are doing just that, slaughtering. Another group has said over 52,000 Christians in Nigeria reportedly been targeted and killed by Islamist extremists, while approximately 34,000 moderate Muslims have been murdered as well since 2009. And, that is less focused upon. I raise it every time, and I hope we all will. They're killing those who don't conform to the radical Islamist view, so they get killed too. I've met with many imams on trips to Nigeria as well as here, and they say if we speak out, we'll be firebombed too. During a visit, there 19,000 churches have also been attacked. More than 7,000 have been murdered in this year alone. During my visit to Jos in 2013, I visited many churches that have been firebombed in Jos. And I listened to the survivors and was moved almost to tears, and to tears with some, when they talked about the numbing loss and pain of losing loved ones. And the churches were decimated, each and every one of them, either by cars coming in and plowing everybody and destroying the physical, or by bombs, and of course always the ever-present AK-47. They pleaded with their own government in the world to end the cruelty and violence. And I've been raising it, as have many others ever since. About 5 million Christians have been displaced and forced into internally displaced persons camps within Nigeria and refugee camps at regional and sub-regional borders, according to an Inter-Society report. Open Doors reports, and again, I hope we can finally get beyond just saying nothing's to see here. While Christians used to be vulnerable only to Muslim-majority northern states, this violence continues to spread into the Middle Belt and even further south. The attacks are shockingly brutal. Many believers are killed, particularly men, while women are often kidnapped and targeted for what? Sexual violence, rape, and other abuse. More believers are killed for their faith in Nigeria than anywhere else in the world. These militants also destroy homes, churches, and livelihoods. And many people don't go to school anymore. One estimate is 10,000 schools have been closed due to this violence.
In this video, I decided to...
Sorry about that. 1 second. Just going to move back quickly. Now, whilst we're doing the adjustments, I didn't want that to happen. We're playing it back, so that will happen. I'm just going to quickly allow that to go across and then do what I need to do. But please keep in mind, all of what we're seeing is we have to be very, very... Look, I cannot blame anybody on ground for wanting the U.S. to come in like yesterday. I cannot. I'm not, in the position to say, oh, no, don't. I cannot say that. But what I am saying is that we should look at, I'm actively encouraging us to look at other, ways, to look at other means. Now, can we perhaps, we can be talking to other countries so that the help, the kind of particular help we need is the people being allowed to have arms themselves in the communities, because when the people have the arms, they can protect themselves. I had one person say this, and I'll see if I can get that quote out. I actually saw that yesterday somewhere. I'll see if I can dig that out. We're doing this broadcast and see if I can play it. But it is worth looking into. Let's proceed anyway.
Protect its own citizens. Yet the brutal reality is that the perpetrators of these crimes operate with impunity. The lack of accountability sends a chilling message that the lives of Christian farmers and their families are expendable. This failure has rightfully been called out by the President of the United States, President Trump, and Secretary of State Rubio. The United States must not stand by idly. I've introduced resolutions, and others have been introduced as well. Res 82. I've done that previously on 82, asking that the Biden administration, we had an interesting conversation and debate on that resolution. It did pass 26 to 21, and part of the argument that was made by Mr. Meeks and my very distinguished colleague to my left is that it's the President and the Secretary of State that needs to make that call. not us. I think we can encourage something, that's what it did, but nevertheless, now they made the call, and I think we need to, double down and try to stop this. HRES 860, which I've introduced, also calls on conditioning U.S. foreign assistance, and it must be tied to progress from the Nigerian government in preventing persecution, prosecuting perpetrators, and protecting all communities. Second, it would provide direct humanitarian assistance, especially the faith-based groups working on the ground in the Middle Belt. What we're hearing is that it's not getting through. People are hungry, so we need to make sure that they're helped. And third, we must impose targeted sanctions pursuant to the Global Magnitsky Act, using visa bans and access freezes against individuals and entities responsible for these gross human rights abuses. President Trump, as I conclude, said, Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria. The United States cannot stand by while atrocities are happening in Nigeria. I yield to my good friend and colleague, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of the witnesses who are going to be testifying today on conflict and religious persecution in Nigeria. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation we'll have with Ambassador Pratt and Deputy Assistant Secretary McGee, as this committee is long overdue to hold a hearing with Trump administration officials. The African continent continues to be both increasingly important and increasingly overlooked. The continent is the youngest in the world, and in Nigeria alone, 70% of the population is under 35, and 40% is under 15. So it represents the generations who will continue to lead and solve the world's problems. Nigeria has a unique position as a bellwether as Africa's largest economy, most populous nation, and a significant actor in the region and on the world stage. And meanwhile, Nigeria is facing its own challenges, like rising insecurity, shrinking freedom of expression, and a struggling economy. So let's talk about the very real conflict and violence happening in Nigeria. Nigeria is facing multiple different security challenges in various parts of the country, including violent extremist groups in the northeast, criminal banditry in the northwest, and across the country, farmer-herder conflict in the Middle Belt, and other intercommunal violence in central and northern regions. Several factors are driving these conflicts. Yes, ethnicity and religion play a role in some cases, but other dynamics like poor governance, resource competition, climate change, and population pressures are important drivers that need to be addressed. I appreciate the chairman's passion on this and his long work on Nigeria. I think it's a distortion to say that what we're trying to say is that there's nothing to see here. In fact, there is something to see here. There is very real conflict and violence that we need to address. I've been working on addressing conflict in Nigeria since 2013, 2014, when I was part of the counter Boko Haram strategy at the State Department. The violence impacting both Christian and Muslim communities is real, and the Nigerian government can and should do more to address it. I was horrified to learn of the killing of 2 people and the kidnapping of the pastor and a worshiper at a church in Kwara State. And this came only a few days after, as the chairman mentioned, criminal bandits kidnapped 25 girls in Kebbi State. But it is counterproductive to adopt oversimplistic narratives about the multiple complex overlapping security challenges and violence across the country. The victims in the Kebbi State kidnapping were all Muslim girls. So violence affects everyone, and false narratives perpetuate harmful stereotypes and motivate tensions and violence based on religious identity. Distorting what's happening into a solely religious narrative erases the real drivers of violence and makes it harder to implement effective solutions. And it can fuel violence against the very groups the Trump administration claims it wants to protect. That's why I'm alarmed by President Trump's rhetoric about this violence and threats to go into Nigeria, guns a-blazing, and to wipe out terrorists. We are already receiving reports of increased tensions between Christian and Muslim populations following this rhetoric. President Trump's threat is reckless, and any unilateral military action in Nigeria would be illegal. Congress has not authorized force in Nigeria to protect Christians, and any action without Nigeria's consent violates international law.
Beg your pardon, we're having that little problem that we have there. Just want to make sure I deal with that. So as I've said it before, I'm off again, obviously. We're going to get back in there. So let me just get that fixed right quick and we'll carry on. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to deal with that in a long time, but we'll carry on for a bit and see how long more we can do this until we get there. But just bear with me. Of course, I'm here. We're back again. Here we go. Okay. Thank you for your understanding.
On Nigeria policy, since I was at the State Department in 2014, so I know firsthand these security challenges are multifaceted and they require a holistic approach. A military-led approach risks more civilian casualties and impunity, which will only fuel violent extremism more. So we need to use more tools from our foreign policy toolbox if we're serious about helping Nigeria protect its citizens. That means we need to leverage diplomacy and engage with Nigeria on how we can help support their response while pushing for important reforms within Nigeria's institutions. We also need to utilize foreign assistance to fund programs to help prevent violence and address conflict drivers. But the Trump administration so far has hobbled these tools. On the diplomatic front, while I'm glad to see Ambassador Pratt will be here representing the African Affairs Bureau, we still have yet to see even a nomination for an Assistant Secretary for Africa. And we don't have a Senior Director for Africa at the NSC either. There are several emergent conflicts in Africa, including in Nigeria, but also in Sudan, DRC, and across the Sahel and in Ethiopia that demand high-level, consistent, and substantive engagement. Occasional attention from the President, while most of the time welcome, won't be enough to see lasting results on all of these different crises. And on the development front, President Trump's dismantling of USAID and cuts of hundreds of millions of dollars worth foreign assistance in Nigeria is worsening the violence. For years, the United States has supported Nigerian institutions, civil society, faith-based leaders, and researchers to address the conflict, violence, and religious freedom challenges. These programs proactively prevented and directly addressed the violence this administration is now concerned about. For example, a recent article in DevX highlighted a program that Secretary Rubio terminated, which has left a void in communities that suffer violence. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a DevX article titled "The Cuts That Bleed: What Happens When Peace Programs Go Dark." Thank you. This article focuses on a former program implemented by Search for Common Ground, a peace-building organization that provided critical early warning in communities in Yelwata, a region in Nigeria's Middle Belt, where conflict and violence have erupted between Muslim herders and Christian farmers. This early warning program was responsible for fewer violent incidences before Secretary Rubio terminated it. In June, this same community was left in a lurch without this extra early warning support when an attack happened in Makurdi. Nearly 200 people were killed, hundreds burned alive in their homes and market stalls torched, and almost 4,000 people fled. And this is just one example where the United States has abandoned communities with no explanation. I have another article, this time from the LA Times by former USAID Foreign Service Officer Daniel Morris, that details another program that was helping prevent violence, but was discontinued. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record an LA Times article titled "Trump Cuts Nigeria's Aid Back in March, Now He Wonders Why It's So Violent." Thank you. This article discusses a program called the Community Initiatives to Promote Peace that operated in northern Nigeria. It trained community elders, including religious and tribal leaders, in conflict resolution, and the results were impressive. After giving one group training and making another one a control group for 6 months, each group was asked if their communities experienced violence. Here's what the article says. Only 10% of people in communities that received negotiation training and dialogue meetings said yes, compared to 41% of people in communities that hadn't. The Nigerians in the treatment group reported feeling more secure, more likely to walk around their communities, and less likely to avoid certain areas than those in the control group. We don't always see these kinds of results. So the fact that we were and the administration eliminated this program is incredibly short-sighted and counterproductive given their apparent interest in this issue. So if we want the United States to help prevent and address conflict in Nigeria, we can't pull back and eliminate our tools like President Trump has done. I urge the administration to reverse these decisions, nominate people at senior levels to work on Africa issues, and commit to working on this seriously, not just through a few Truth Social posts. So I look forward to hearing the testimony of Ambassador Pratt and Deputy Assistant Secretary McGee on what the State Department is planning to do to address the violence in Nigeria and how it plans to partner with Nigeria on doing so. And lastly, while I'm glad we have our witnesses here to discuss Nigeria today, I would be remiss to not also raise Sudan, since this is our first time with the State Department witnesses in front of this subcommittee this Congress, and we still have not had a budget hearing. The situation in Sudan is horrific. And while I'm glad to see this war finally getting high-level attention from President Trump, I look forward to hearing from Ambassador Pratt about what the department's plan is to both make a deal that brings a lasting end to the war in Sudan and invest in a real peace process for the Sudanese people. Thank you. I yield back.
We will now receive a testimony from Bishop Anabe. He is leaving for a major speech in Germany, and will miss his flight if we wait until thankfully our two very distinguished witnesses from state have agreed, because normally the protocol is they go first, and I do thank them for that. But I'd like to welcome Bishop Anagbe back. He gave very compelling testimony back in March, and we all appreciated that very much. But he is in Benue State. He was ordained a Catholic priest in August of 1994, and Pope Francis elevated him to bishop in 2014. So, Bishop Anagbe, the floor is yours.
Your wallet sucks. That's why we invented the Ridge wallet. Hey, I'm Daniel, one of the founders of...
Beg your pardon by that. So just give me a minute, please. So as I was saying to you, one of the things that we need to be very aware of is this, that the Nigerian government has for many years not allowed citizens to defend themselves. And in fact, anybody that has weapons to defend themselves, they have those weapons. Even the ones that have been, where you have a license for. Even in that case, they don't allow you to even have that in place. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to speak. Let's hear the Reverend. Let's hear the Reverend. Let's hear the Reverend. So here we go. Let's hear the Reverend.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Member Chris Smith. The Most Reverend Wilfred Chikwanagbe, Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Makurdi, Benue, Nigeria. Before the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, African Subcommittee, November 20, 2025. President Trump's redesignation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern, CPC, a serious, well-founded wake-up call. I am here this evening talking that because I have the privilege of witnessing, the privilege of experiencing. I'm not talking as a privilege of opinion. Mr. Chairman, ranking members, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me back to testify on the escalating crisis of Christian persecution and genocide in Nigeria. 6 months ago, precisely on 13th March 2025, when I last appeared before this committee, I warned that the situation was there and demanded urgent attention. Tragically, the past half year has proven those warnings understated the continued attack on vulnerable Christian villages by the Fulani ethnic militia and their counterparts, both in the Middle Belt of Nigeria and elsewhere in the country. Since my testimony in March 2025, credible reports from organizations monitoring religious freedom, including Open Doors and our own Justice, Development and Peace Commission in Makurdi Diocese, have documented continuing attacks on Christian villages, especially in the Middle Belt states of Benue and Plateau, perpetrated by the Fulani militia. Thousands more have been displaced, some adopted or subjected, with entire villages razed and churches destroyed. My own village of Aondana in Gwe West local government was attacked and several of my relatives killed on May 22nd, 2025. An entire convent of Reverend Sisters of the Clarisha Parish was displaced, along with the local parish, Catholic parish. Within the days following that attack, nearby villages like Naka also witnessed attacks. In fact, on the 24th May 2025, one of my priests, Father Solomon Atongu, was shot and left to die in the pool of his blood, while those traveling with him were adopted. Though he survived the attack, he is unable to walk freely because he has a broken bone. A few weeks before, on Palm Sunday, April 13, 2025, with the attack occurring late that night into the early hours of April 14th, Fulani militants launched a coordinated assault on Christian communities in Plateau State, Nigeria, primarily targeting the village of Zike in the Basa local government area near Jos. This incident was part of a broader wave of violence in the region during Holy Week, targeting Christians as they prepare to celebrate one of the most holy, important feasts in our church. In my own diocese of Makurdi, you are all familiar with the massacres of Saturday, 13th June in Yellowater, where 278 persons, men, women, and children were killed in a manner too gory to describe here by people shouting Allah Akbar, while slaughtering their victims. It took the prayers of the Holy Father Pope Leo XIV on Sunday, June 14th, for the government in Nigeria to even acknowledge this evil. Even so, the federal government still seeks to downplay the numbers and has yet to properly care for the survivors, even as I speak. Adoptions of clergy and laity remain rampant. Priests and pastors are prime targets for elimination. On 17th November 2025, another priest from Kaduna Archdiocese was kidnapped while his brother was shot dead and others taken into captivity. On the same day, a school was attacked in Kebbi State with many kidnapped, and the vice principal of the school was killed. Reports are also rife of the capture of a brigadier general of the Nigerian army with some army officers and soldiers by the Islamists. This is the daily experience of many Christians in Nigeria. Violence is spreading southward, displacing millions and destroying farmland, creating a humanitarian crisis compounded by food insecurity. Attacks by Fulani militants, Boko Haram, Islamic State of West African province, ISWAP, have intensified not only in the Middle Belt and northern states, but spreading southward and targeting Christian communities with impunity. We hoped the CPC designation by President Trump at the end of October might stabilize the situation, but instead it is deteriorating into one of the most later periods of for Nigerian Christians in recent memory. Like it is now commonly acknowledged, Nigeria remains the deadliest place on earth to be a Christian. More believers are killed there annually than in the rest of the world combined. Yet, perpetrators face little accountability, and the Nigerian government's response since the CPC designation is to unleash vain glory speakers and willing tools to spin the narrative and make false equivalencies about Muslim deaths. But I would like to ask the question here, who is killing the Muslims up north? Is there any Christian militia displacing millions and occupying lands in Nigeria? The government of Nigeria's silence and refusal to engage in the face of continued killings and displacements has deepened feelings of abandonment among the people. The national leadership appears disengaged, treating the Christian genocide report as a non-issue instead of considering it a national emergency. This lack of political will undermines trust in government institutions and fuels perceptions of complicity or indifference. Mr. Chairman, honorable members, allow me to briefly mention another point so close to my heart, the humanitarian and social impact of this genocide. In the Middle Belt alone, millions of internally displaced persons remain in camps, unable to return to their ancestral lands. This threatens cultural continuity, religious and economic survival. The psychological trauma of survivors of these attacks is immense, with little access to counseling or rehabilitation. Widows, orphans, and survivors face ongoing threats. Girls and women endure sexual violence as a weapon. So many others resort to unsafe coping mechanisms for daily sustenance, destroying families, guarantees that no more Christian will be born from so many traumatized women. This is one of the elements of genocide, securing the disappearance of a group by longer-term measures other than murder. Without quick intervention, Christianity risks elimination in parts of northern and middle belt Nigeria within a very short time. Let me put it on record here that on behalf of millions of Christians in Nigeria and in the diaspora, we want to thank President Donald J. Trump for his bold leadership in designating Nigeria as a CPC. I commend you, Mr. Chris Smith, and this subcommittee's ongoing leadership and the recent U.S. designation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern. It is a vital step, but must be backed by serious action. 1. Using the Magnitsky Act for targeted sanctions on Nigerian government officials and others tolerating or condoning Islamic violence in the country. Tie security and other development or humanitarian aid to measurable protection improvements. Expand humanitarian support for IDPs. The IDPs must return to their ancestral homes and lands with security guarantees by the Nigerian government. They must also be supported to rebuild their economic livelihoods and enjoy basic services such as education and sanitation. Support bills like the Nigerian Religious Freedom Accountability Act to hold perpetrators accountable. This point cannot be overemphasized because it is impunity that fuels the violence we suffer. Irrespective of who are being killed, the prime question is, are there killings in Nigeria? And the government should stop it. International advocacy, work with allies to praise Nigeria at the UN and ensure discriminatory laws and blasphemy laws are eradicated or expunged from the Constitution. Closing call to action. The CPC designation has brought immense joy, hope, and spiritual resilience to communities under siege in Nigeria. The Christian faith-based organizations remain among the few sources of relief and encouragement, filling the vacuum left by government inaction. However, the church alone cannot stop the killings. It requires coordinated political, military, and humanitarian intervention. Mr. Chairman and members, the blood of Nigerian Christians cries out to you people. We cannot afford to wait any longer. Renew hearings, pass binding legislations, and use every tool of U.S. influence to demand change. America remains the only country in the world with an International Religious Freedom Act. America has a unique role in defending religious freedom globally. Please enact concrete actions according to the CPC designation. We all know that inaction emboldens the extremists even more. Thank you for listening. I welcome you for this. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Bishop Anabe, thank you so very, very much for your testimony, for your leadership at great risk to yourself and so many of your priests and diocesan folks. I do thank you, and I wish you well on your trip, and I hope you make your plane. Thank you so very much. It now falls to me as a great honor to introduce our two witnesses from the administration, and they're on their way in right now. Okay. While we're waiting for them to be seated, I would have. No, I got it. There you go. Good.
With AI,
You can
Okay, again, you all know what it is. We're gonna I'll probably do two parts of this in a way, and we'll finesse it a bit more, I suppose. Just want to try and make sure that we don't have those things necessarily, distracting what we're doing, because we wanted to just give you an opportunity to see and address what is being said. So let me just get that back in there.
2023 to 2025, he served as the Bureau's Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary. Prior to that, he was U.S. Ambassador to Djibouti from 2021 to 2023. He is a recipient of the Presidential Rank Award, a Distinguished Honor Award, the Director General's Award for Reporting, and the James Clement Dunn Award for Excellence, and he has spent a lifetime working very effectively on African issues. Thank you, Ambassador Pratt, for being here and testifying. Then we'll hear from Jake McGee, who joined the Department of State in April of 2025 as Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. Prior to joining the department, Mr. McGee was an attorney at the global law firm in Washington, D.C., and spent several years in the Middle East as an executive recruiter and taught English in a refugee camp in northern Jordan. Without objection, your full bios will be made a part of the record. Ambassador Pratt, the floor is yours.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Jacobs, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the administration's redesignation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern under the International Religious Freedom Act. In June of this year in Benue State, Nigeria, Fulani militants armed with guns and machetes set homes and food stores ablaze and locked families inside burning buildings, killing over 200 Christians. Witnesses reported assailants shouting Allahu Akbar as they assaulted St. Joseph's Church. The Fulani militants targeted Christian farmers, many of them internally displaced persons, already seeking refuge from previous violence. Benue State Governor Hyacinth Ali recently warned that his state is, quote, under siege and being attacked by terrorists and bandits, highlighting the Nigerian government's failure to intervene. The scale and brutality of violence facing Christian communities is tragic and unacceptable. It represents a serious failing on the part of the authorities. Similarly, on December 23, 2023, a series of coordinated attacks began and continued into Christmas morning in Plateau State. The attacks resulted in hundreds of victims. Many were women, children, and elderly, unable to flee. At least 8 churches were destroyed. Plateau State communities are still reeling today from the overt religious-based violence of those attacks and their unanswered calls for help. The Nigerian government must do more to protect its Christian citizens who are being targeted and killed.
My dad can't lose weight with Tai Chi, so...
Okay, we're back again. Just bear with me. I wasn't able to do this immediately yesterday, so it does do things in a way that is not quite what I wanted. So, but like I said, we will get through it anyway. I may not finish all the broadcast today. I may come back and do the second half of it tomorrow. Give me enough time to have actually been able to iron out one or two of these gremlin things. But anyway, we will see how we can get that going. It's important that we hear this anyway, because I think it's important that we understand what has been done. Give me 1 second. I may actually want to change the angle of how this is done. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try and do something with this. Just give me 1 second. Okay, I think we will do it this way. Just stay with me. I'm going to try, because I'm trying to... Okay. Just bear with me. I'm just trying to see if I can get it done in a particular way. Okay. Bear with me, please. No. Okay. Now I'm just going to have to just do it that way. It's easier. Okay. Let's proceed.
Nigeria is a key regional partner, Africa's largest democracy and most populous nation, with whom we share economic and security interests. It is in the United States' interest to work with the Nigerian government on a plan of action to strengthen security for at-risk Christian communities and Nigerians of all faiths whose ability to practice their faith is put in jeopardy by endemic violence and terrorism. We welcome Nigeria's willingness to cooperate following the CPC designation. We look forward to seeing these commitments put into action. The Trump administration is developing a plan to incentivize and compel the Nigerian government to better protect Christian communities and improve religious freedom. This plan will consider U.S. state and Treasury engagement on sanctions, as well as possible Department of War engagement on counterterrorism and other efforts to protect religious communities. Secretary Rubio and Deputy Secretary Landau have engaged already with members of the Nigerian government on the importance of addressing the violence facing Christians in the Middle Belt. Ultimately, the President's decision underscores the administration's commitment to promoting religious freedom as a universal right and a fundamental freedom. The levels of violence and atrocities committed against Christians and communities of all faiths in Nigeria are appalling and threaten this universal right. We remain open to working together with the Nigerians, but we also expect the Nigerian government to deliver results on the ground as proof of their commitment to this universal right. Thank you for your attention, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, Mr. McGee.
Chairman Smith, ranking member. I'll start over. Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Jacobs, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to join my colleague, Senior Bureau Official Pratt, to discuss the Trump administration's decision to redesignate Nigeria as a country of particular concern in accordance with the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. President Trump's decisive action to designate Nigeria as a CPC made clear that the United States stands ready to champion the rights of Christians and protect them from religious persecution. The religious freedom situation in Nigeria is well documented in the annual IRF reports. The IRF Act, designed by Congress nearly 3 decades ago, establishes religious freedom as a U.S. foreign policy priority and mandates that the president call out religious freedom violators as a reflection of the importance our nation places on America's first freedom. As my colleague stated, the levels of violence and atrocities committed against Christians in Nigeria are appalling. Particularly in the Middle Belt, these attacks directly target Christian populations. Ample witness testimonies have confirmed attackers used religious language during their attacks and specifically targeted Christians for killing, abduction, and rape. It is clear Nigerians are being attacked and killed because of their faith, and the Nigerian government must uphold its duty to protect them. The United States stands with civil society and religious actors brave enough to speak about the tragic violence and discrimination they face in Nigeria. When Bishop Wilfred Anagbe and Father Remigius Eula testified before Chairman Smith's hearing last March about religious freedom, these 2 courageous religious leaders reported they received threats rather than protection from the Nigerian government. But the United States listened, and we will continue to listen and act until the Nigerian government protects religious freedom, strengthens its protections for vulnerable Christians, and holds perpetrators accountable. In addition to these failures, Nigerian officials also continue to prosecute individuals for alleged blasphemy, which stands in clear violation of Nigeria's obligation to safeguard free speech. Under the Sharia penal codes enforced in 12 of its states, Nigeria is one of only 8 countries in the world that allows for penalties up to execution for blasphemy, along with Iran and Pakistan, which have long been designated CPCs. When authorities detain individuals accused of blasphemy, the judicial process often takes years while they remain in prison, sometimes on death row. Mobs often take the law into their own hands with impunity. For example, in 2022, a mob killed Deborah Samuel Yakubu, a student of Shehu Shagari College of Education, Sokoto, in a heinous attack after she was accused of blasphemy. This young Christian woman's life was taken too soon, yet her murderers remain free. With horrifying reports of discrimination, abuse, torture, disappearance, and even the murder of individuals simply trying to practice their faith freely and safely, religious freedom is not an abstraction, but an obligation Nigeria must uphold. This administration has heard the steady, clarion call from civil society and religious actors about the pernicious impact of the violence on religious communities. The Nigerian government must protect religious freedom, strengthen protections of vulnerable Christians, hold perpetrators accountable, and make measurable progress toward ending this violence against Christians as well as any Nigerians persecuted for their faith. We greatly appreciate the committee's dedication to shedding light on the situation in Nigeria and support in advancing freedom, religious freedom, not just in Nigeria, but around the world. And I want to personally thank you, Chairman Smith, for your tireless efforts over the decades about religious freedom and, of course, other human rights abuses, including combating human trafficking. So thank you, Chairman Smith. I welcome your questions.
Thank you so very much for your testimonies. The phrase incentivize and compel, which you used, Ambassador Pratt, I think is an excellent one. Last night, and I know others met with the delegation that traveled here, and I know they're meeting with you and other at state. The head of National Security Advisor, Rabuda, and his delegation, including the Attorney General, I raised the very significant issue of CPC is not forever. You can get off of it, and everybody who gets put on CPC, or especially including on the trafficking laws, and I wrote them, Trafficking Victims Protection Act, I wrote that in the year 2000. And I have met with more delegations who always say, not us, that's, somebody else is doing the trafficking, it's not us. There's always this culture of denial. And that goes for states that are our allies who get put on that list, and that includes CPC, and as well as countries that are not necessarily our allies, like China, which is both a Tier 3 country for trafficking and a CPC country, and has been from the very beginning of implementation of Frank Wolf's famous law, the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. So it's such a familiar refrain, and it flies in the face of evidence, and evidence is what it's all about. The prosecutorial discretion that is not shown in Nigeria to go after and to deploy detectives and protection capabilities from the police, it's just not there. We hear it so frequently, and if it is there, show us. They always say, well, they're bandits, or this, or that. But what's the motivation behind Boko Haram? And I went to my opening statement, or would remind you, I kept asking the administration then, why do you keep dismissing that this isn't a radical Islamist organization called Boko Haram? Yeah, they hate moderate Muslims too. I've heard that, like as I said, from many imams myself, and they certainly hate Christians and will kill them to procure their ends. So I just, we need to have that in all human rights. I found that be the case. The author of 2 laws on religious freedom. I did the Frank Wolf bill in 2016, which put entities of particular concern, a lot of other things into the law, working with Frank, who's in retirement. Wolf, that champion for religious freedom. And I gotta tell you, every time I talk to a delegation, every single time, they deny it. Every time. And after a while, it's like, what's your denial going to be? So last night when I was talking to this high-level delegation, I know some of my colleagues met with them as well, I said, we're just looking for progress. We're standing with your oppressed people. These Nigerians are not Americans. We do have a very large diaspora. They're wonderful, many in New Jersey, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about in the country, and we stand in solidarity with the oppressed and not the oppressor. And we wrote in the original Religious Freedom Act, and this is very important because they say, well, we're not killing people, we're not doing, well, engaged in or tolerated. Tolerated, when you don't prosecute, when you don't protect, that's toleration, and that's written right into the law as a criteria for designation of CPC. So I know that's what you've done, and I thank you for your due diligence on this. And there are a lot of other groups, left and right, and Amnesty International keeps saying, and I've raised this with the ICC. I've had ICC prosecutors testify at my hearings, particularly on Nagorno-Karabakh, when they're using food as a weapon. We're not signatories to it, but it's out there. Well, Nigeria is. And Amnesty, again, last year, they keep asking, where's the prosecutions for this, in Nigeria, Amnesty International petitions the ICC judges to end prosecutors' delaying of justice for atrocity crimes. So are they wrong too? And I do hope that, and without objection, I would ask that article be made a part of the record about amnesty. So it's very, very concerning, and I do hope that you will know that this is just par for the course. It's just not us, and it gets very, very tiresome. Show us that it's not you. Open it all up. How many of you, where are the prosecutions? We hear from so many Christians that they dial into the police and nobody shows up. And then there's no investigation. One of my sons is a detective. You've got to do detective work. Find out who it is and put them into jail if they're guilty. And that's not happening. They give some numbers. I remember with Nicholas Ceausescu, when I fought against the Securitate, we used to have people coming around this place saying, oh, he has no religious freedom issues. He allows churches. He was crushing the Jewish as well as the Christian communities through his Securitate, the secret police of Romania. So it's like we just keep seeing this reframe over and over again. So if you might want to comment on that, because again, my argument last night to that high-level delegation, we want you to succeed. We absolutely want you to rid yourself of this cancer that hates moderate Muslims and absolutely hates and kills as well Christians.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as you and I discussed yesterday, the designation, we hope, will sharpen minds and sharpen attention to the issue. As you mentioned, there is a delegation already here now in Washington this week, a very senior delegation. They'll be meeting with the Deputy Secretary of State. They're meeting with Department of War officials as well. And the Secretary of State has directed us at the State Department to work with the Nigerian government on an action plan and to set up a task force to address this issue and use all of the tools that are at our disposal to focus minds and focus attention on this issue. Thank you.
This simple yet brilliant trick to heat your home in 90 seconds will save thousands of dollars on your heating bill this winter. An ingenious way to heat your home without wasting money is sweeping the market by storm in Australia.
As you mentioned, Chairman, this is not a new issue. This has been going on in Nigeria for several years. President Trump designated Nigeria in 2020, and the previous administration removed Nigeria as a CPC in 2021 and 2022 and 2023. And so a CPC designation, as my colleague just mentioned, focuses the minds of people in Nigeria. It puts the onus on the government of Nigeria to take action to protect its own citizens, including people of all faiths, not just Christians. Muslim communities are affected as well, other communities. And so the CPC designation is a step that starts a conversation that leads to greater engagement with the Nigerian government, because ultimately this is their responsibility.
Let me just, there is talk, while CPC is not a designation of genocide, there is a very cogent argument to be made that this is a genocide. And I remind people that, again, there's all this denial. I had 3 hearings on the Armenian genocide, and I had sitting right where you're sitting, Mr. McGee, an ambassador from Turkey, who said, if you recognize, and we had a good bipartisan effort going on this, if you recognize the so-called Armenian genocide, we'll throw you out of your base in Incirlik. And I said, what a great NATO partner you are. It was just amazing. We've seen it over and over again. When I went to Darfur and met with Bashir, we then went to the UN, Human Rights Commission, as it was called then, not the Council. We were flabbergasted that they wouldn't call what was happening in Darfur a genocide. And again, I remind everybody, Article 2 says genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, in whole or in part. It's very clear. Now, we're not talking in CPC about genocide, but when we fought against ISIS, and Jeff Fortenberry did a very serious bill